Good afternoon and welcome to the WAVY Digital Desk. I'm your host, Sarah Gu. Today we're going to be talking about Juneteenth. The federal holiday is tomorrow. We know that there's been events going on all month in last weekend in particular around the area that we've covered and WAVY has been at. You might have seen some talent, moving around at the different festivals. But tomorrow is the actual holiday and it's the fourth year it's been a federal holiday. So today we're going to be having an ODU assistant professor, Marvin Childs, with us today to talk about what Juneteenth is, especially in Virginia. He's a professor of African American history. So I'm going to bring him on now. Marvin, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Yes, thank you for bringing me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, just to get started, I think people should have a background of what Juneteenth is, but could you just give us some history on the date tomorrow?
Yeah, no. So Juneteenth was originally one of the many celebratory holidays that Black Americans they created and engaged in after the Civil War to, one, celebrate the end of the war, two, to celebrate the ending of slavery, and three, to express to the rest of the country that they desire to be American citizens, full-fledged American citizens with equal rights. And so that's where it started. And so there was a bunch of different holidays. It wasn't just Juneteenth. That was more a deep South thing. Up here in the Upper South, up in Virginia, we called it Emancipation Day. And so it wasn't really until around the 1960s, 1970s that the Juneteenth bug spread, as in other celebratory holidays. Again, all the same thing, really. That it began to really creep up, not just out of the Deep South, but really throughout the rest of the country. And that was at the behest of Black historical organizations, Black Greek life organizations, historically Black colleges, and then eventually white-run organizations and interracial run organizations. And again, I'm talking public history. I'm talking racial reconciliation groups begin to really push for for Juneteenth to be recognized and celebrated as an American holiday. And so that's kind of how we got it to where it is now.
And it's hard to believe it's only been 4 years since Juneteenth became a federal holiday. And, people I spoke with, some organizers from events last weekend, traditionally they put their event on Saturday, of course, because they didn't have that June 19th date off, which I thought was really interesting that obviously it had to be moved to a holiday where people could celebrate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's just the trouble with holidays. I mean, the King holiday is not original. It was originally on the 15th, right? King's birthday, and I think most people celebrate it now, like a couple days before or a couple days after. So yeah, that's just the trouble with holidays.
Yeah. And in particular in Hampton Roads, we know that we have a big racial history, in terms of movement, in terms of obviously the river and the slave trade. And so down here in particular, what is the meaning for Juneteenth, that you speak about?
Yeah, no. So when I typically give talks on Juneteenth about Juneteenth, the one thing that I let people know is that regardless of what you call it, right? Juneteenth, Emancipation Day, really doesn't matter. It's a day for really all Americans to come together and to realize, and I say this a lot, is to one, realize, and two, to acknowledge that July 4 was true, because July 4 was the birth of a country, founded that every person was created equal, regardless of race, color, and creed, and that wasn't true for the large part of American history. And Juneteenth was a celebration of that coming into fruition, or at least on its way of coming into fruition. And so for me, if you love to celebrate July 4, you got to celebrate Juneteenth. Because that makes July 4 even more true for everyone, particularly for African Americans, for people, again, for more than half of America's history, July 4 wasn't true for them. And so, yeah, that's what I often say. And especially in the Tidewater area, that's, again, same thing, right? You had a huge racial history, huge history with Jim Crow, and local institutions, museums, universities, public schools, you name it, even local governments and even state governments have now come around to that, right? And so now I think we're at a space to where Black holidays can be seen and celebrated, not just by Black people, but by all people as American holidays.
Right, exactly. American holidays. And you've heard people also say Freedom Day. That's another way that people have said it, freedom for all. And I think that seems to be a really particular, signal that it's different than July 4th. It's Freedom Day for every American.
Yes, no, absolutely, absolutely. And again, to me, when I think of Juneteenth, because I get asked a lot, right? What do you think about Juneteenth? As a Black history professor, because Juneteenth, the name itself, the name of that day, it wasn't celebrated, up here really until about the 70s and 80s, and even then, it was mainly celebrated inside of Black churches. I mean, really segmented off places in society. And I get asked all the time, what do you think about it? Should it be celebrated? Should it be? Is this a real holiday? And again, I always say, man, if you want to think about Juneteenth, think about that and July 4 together, right? If you really, really believe that America was a place that was again founded on principles that we have not yet lived up to, and we have struggled to live up to, you got to think about Juneteenth and July 4 together. You can't think about them separate. It does have a Black origin, unlike July 4 per se, but the message and the mode is the same in my opinion.
And I'm going to put some video up on screen of some Juneteenth celebrations that have taken place over the last few years just to give people an idea of how the community celebrates. But I was going to ask you, which is interesting, what are some of those top questions you get? And it is interesting, and I've seen it, whether it's dialogue online or conversations I've had, that people do still ask, what is it? Why are we celebrating this, additional holiday? And, to hear you say it and somebody's asking you as, a professor, to get that question, do you struggle with answering it? I mean, obviously you can back down to the history roots of it and sort of give them that answer, but what is that question like to get?
Yeah, no, it's not a hard question to answer, because again, for so many people throughout the country, Juneteenth is foreign to them because it kind of was, right? And so again, Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, all those different celebratory holidays of the ending of slavery, those died out of public spaces by and large by the 1920s and 1930s, primarily because of two things. One, Jim Crow segregation had really calcified, so instead of Black people in the South celebrating those days in public spaces. I mean, I'm talking like downtown, Main Street. They would have to celebrate them only in Black sections of cities, right? And in towns and in counties. And so you had that. And then you also had former slaves dying off, right? So by the 1930s, most former slaves, those who remember the Union Army marching through various parts of the South, they were gone. And so for a long time, just that concept and that name was just not native to a lot of people. They just really didn't know about it. And so Black communities continue to celebrate a form of Juneteenth, but the name just kind of stuck. I mean, it's a catchy name, and also it has significance because it's on that day that every single Black person in the former slave South had officially been notified that they were free. And so yeah, I have no. It's not hard for me to answer. Again, and I go back to July 4. To me, when I think of Juneteenth, I think of July 4. And so when people have asked me, and they have, should we celebrate Juneteenth, say here in Virginia, or should we celebrate Juneteenth in places outside of Texas in the Deep South where Juneteenth was alive and well for so long? I say absolutely. If we celebrate July 4th, we have to celebrate Juneteenth. And it's a catch-all. It's an easy way to kind of meld and mesh all of those different freedom days, emancipation days, to bring it together and then push it out to the public, and to get the public to really see and understand exactly why the legacy of slavery is important. It's and really, I mean, it's a celebratory holiday for everyone, right? If you're a white American, non-white American, Black American, you should be happy to have a Juneteenth holiday, because it's one of the few days that we can all come together and really see less of our differences and more of our commonalities, through really a shared history of strife.
And it's interesting, talking about whether it should just be celebrated in Texas or the Deep South. Well, on July 4th, obviously, all the states weren't together. So if we were to start going by statehood, obviously the holiday would look a little bit different.
Yes. No, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I mean, when you have national holidays, you're gonna have conflict about, should the holiday be adopted. I mean, when King's birthday was making its way to being a national holiday, there are a lot of places that didn't want to celebrate King's birthday. I remember, well, not remember, but as a historian, I've learned over time that, a place like Virginia did not want to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday because, in the minds of many Virginians, Martin Luther King, his legacy was less seen here than it was seen elsewhere. And so it was, oh, let's celebrate local civil rights leaders more than King. But the King Day was not just about Martin Luther King. It was about the ideas right? The ideas and about racial equality, about making one America, not two Americas or separate Americas. And so if we just have to throw his name onto it to kind of bring people together, I'm all for it. And I think Juneteenth is the same thing. Yeah, to me, it's a name that symbolizes a larger idea that all of these different celebratory days share, and that is the ending of slavery and the bringing forth of America's core ideals that have been long denied to more than half of the population for so long.
Right. And I want to talk too, you've done research on race and reconciliation, as a part of your studies. Does that influence how you talk about Juneteenth, of course, in terms of educating the public, as you just talked about, and sort of answering more questions?
Yes, yes. So the study of racial reconciliation, not an easy study, a field of study, because it wasn't a field of study. And I became fascinated with it while going through college, and realizing just how many attempts, Black groups, white groups, non-Black groups, I mean, different just groups of people throughout the country, different efforts they engaged in to try to really get everyone, or not everyone, but to get different types of Americans to see themselves as Americans. And that went from celebrating things on certain holidays to creating various institutions, NGOs, government programs to try to create racial equity. I mean, there were different things they did, but again, the core ideal was to bring people together and not allow them to just live apart separately. And so, yeah, I mean, my study of racial reconciliation, it fits directly into this, because Juneteenth was one of the things that people did to try to get Blacks and whites, particularly in the South, right? Blacks and whites to come together, and to have a shared holiday. There is a minister that is near and dear to my heart. He's a mentor of mine, and he said that talking about Juneteenth, and he wasn't saying that specifically, but talking about America's history through holidays like Juneteenth allows you to say things and allows you to get at the heart of issues that you normally can't get to, right? Because I mean, when you're in a political arena, when you are in a cultural arena, people get really divided really fast, especially when you start to bring up hot button issues. But when you begin to use celebratory holidays and the meanings behind them, you're able to really get people on the same page and to get them to understand things that when you go onto Capitol Hill, or going to Capitol Hill, or you go into a place of cultural significance, they're not going to be as open to it. And so these are days I think that have importance well beyond just having a barbecue, or going out to the park, or going to no, you're actually getting people to begin to express things and to begin to talk about issues that they normally can't talk about without infighting and without dissension.
And it's interesting too because there was one event on Saturday, excuse me, in Norfolk where they made sure to bring out, people from different political parties, different leaders in the area to really show that this day goes beyond that. It goes beyond the politics of somebody, it goes beyond the race of somebody.
Yes, no, exactly. I mean, so the making of Juneteenth into, just say, the state holiday in Texas. There was a Republican governor that signed that bill into law, and it was the Texas Democrats that pushed it, right? So you had bipartisan support to rolling that out and making it a state holiday, which really platformed Juneteenth, and then eventually made it to where it was something celebrated throughout the rest of the country. And even here, I mean, we've had people on both sides of the political aisle in Virginia that have celebrated Juneteenth, that have gone to public events for Juneteenth. I mean, it's to me, I think it's a great thing. It is a great thing because it does show people that Juneteenth is not it shouldn't be a partisan issue, right? It should not be something that one side likes, the other side hates, or one race likes, one race hates. It's like, no, this is about America's core ideals. And if we're all Americans, which we are, right? If we're all Americans, we all live here, we all want to stay here, we all want to make this place a better place. There are certain things there are certain days and certain events and certain really concepts we have to come together and to be able to celebrate together. And again, I think Juneteenth is perfect for that. I really do. And so, yeah, sorry, I'll turn it back over to you.
No, I mean, I'm going to give you the space because obviously, with not even just your experience, but, obviously how passionate you are, about it. It's just great to hear sort of you break down, especially, for viewers, for people that might not have learned about certain things in their history books, even. It was one thing that probably wasn't in everyone's history book. And now with different rules about what you can read in school too. You want to make sure that people out there understand the background and the history and sort of what this is all about. And it's hard to believe, that we're only 4 years out and there is, maybe pushback or there are questions about what this is. But to your point earlier, you hope obviously with years of improvement that just like other holidays that have been added on, this will just be another celebratory day, for the people in America.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and we have several what do we call it? I would guess like ethnically based
Right.
holidays or
And
things
you've
throughout the
heard the
country.
changes of Columbus Day, becoming Indigenous Peoples Day, and there has been that movement.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. And again, I think the messaging is the same on those, right? So for I mean, I know Cinco de Mayo is not a holiday, right? But I mean, I don't have to be of Latin American descent
Right.
to celebrate that, right? And then and the list goes on and on of various ethnic holidays that people who live in say in cities that are ethnically diverse, you don't have to be a part of that community to celebrate them and to celebrate their contribution to American life. And so I look at Juneteenth the same way. And even then, Juneteenth is not just a celebration of Black Americans because it took both Black and white Americans to end the institution of slavery and to force everyday people in the North, in the South, out West to really ask the question, is slavery consistent with our core ideals? Is discrimination of people based upon race a part of our core ideals? And it I mean, it literally brought the nation to civil war, right? People died over this, and so yeah. I again, just because Juneteenth is a holiday created by Black people to celebrate the end of slavery, it's more importantly, and the people who created it, they made it very very clear, right? Like this is a holiday to celebrate the country and how far it's come and where it can go in the future. And so, just because there's a Black face on it does not make it not American or un-American. No, it's actually more American in that regard. And so, yeah.
No, and thank you for pointing that out again, the community aspect of this. Obviously, we don't want there to be separation on Juneteenth that goes exactly against the point of the holiday.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I hope we get to a point in this country where we don't have to have these conversations anymore, right? About, is a holiday just for a certain part or a certain segment of American society? I think that's really, really hate to say it, low vibration thinking, because the whole point of having it as a national holiday is that it's national.
Right.
Um, and it's something that we all can take something from. Just like the old saying that Black history is American history, that's 100% true. Juneteenth is an American holiday, right? We're all implicated in this event, in this holiday, in this legacy, really. And we have to, and I think as a country, we have to see it that way, right? People shouldn't look at it as a holiday that was created during the days of slavery or created just after slavery as something that only the descendants of slavery should be a part of. No, everyone should be a part of this because we're all implicated in it. We're all living with the results of it, and so we should come together, understand it, and celebrate it.
Absolutely. And the last thing, I guess, in terms of people putting it into their schedules, if you will, is, it's interesting to see companies roll out Juneteenth as a holiday and how that has worked on that end of it. And I know that, private companies obviously have their discretion, but, to see how that has been implemented has been interesting as well, or giving an extra day, to celebrate Juneteenth or celebrate maybe if you have different holidays, right? I know that people get off, especially bank holidays, Good Friday, and certain religious holidays, but giving people time, whether they're celebrating holidays over December or holidays that take place in the fall, to give people that flexibility as well to celebrate the days that mean something to them.
Oh yeah, no. What I think has happened with various companies that are doing that is they're not just relying on government to say this is a holiday and we're gonna. I mean, because again, I think back to the struggle of getting King's Holiday implemented as a holiday. That was a huge problem because you had some people acknowledged it, some people didn't. Some states did, some states didn't. For a long time, you couldn't get off of work on that day. And where I think businesses are going now is that they are starting to recognize and acknowledge the diversity within the American workforce, right? The different groups of people who are coming from all walks of life, entering into this space to try to create value in society. And so yeah, I like that they're taking the lead in that regard. I really do.
And, thank you, Marvin, for, talking about this again. To your point, I hope that these conversations, can happen less often, or just like July 4th, we can focus more just on talking about the history of this day and, not the questions that you might get on why the holiday exists. And, obviously it's disappointing to hear that that question's asked, but, it's good for people who are watching this, make sure you know what Marvin said, right? Educate the next person that asks you the question, and make sure that they understand. I mean, are there any other things that, sort of this day brings up in terms of, celebrating it in Virginia or the history of Virginia that sort of just rings true for you?
No, I will say, and it's to something you just said, is that we have to be patient with people too. I think that's also a part of it, is that you can't just spring stuff on people and say, "Ha, we got this holiday. You got to celebrate the holiday. You better." I mean, it takes time, right? It takes time. I mean, it took dozens, and not dozens, or decades. It took almost 100 years, for a lot of states to have to put the history of slavery and Jim Crow in their textbooks. So it took a long time for people to get to the point to where we could have legitimate conversations and dialogues about why these things matter. And I think you just got to be patient with people. I think Juneteenth's going to grow on people. Today, no one questions, King Day, for instance. I keep bringing it up, but no one questions the importance of the civil rights movement, his legacy, and why we celebrate his day. And we will get there with Juneteenth. It's just going to take some time. And I think that those who celebrate Juneteenth, they need to be patient with people, and those who don't celebrate Juneteenth, they should understand at some point they're going to come around, because this is really a holiday for everyone to share and to take part in.
Well, Marvin, thank you so much. And I just want to say, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, I also did link ways to celebrate Juneteenth or to support your community on Juneteenth tomorrow. So just as Marvin said, it is for everybody. So make sure to check that out if you haven't already celebrated this weekend. And, Marvin, thank you for your words of patience, but also your expertise, and I hope people don't have to be patient for too long, but I understand the sharing of the message, and hopefully people can be more educated and pass along the true meaning of Juneteenth to everyone.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And again, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And the best kind of change, positive change, is incremental positive change. That's a belief of mine. And so yeah, I believe that patience is really a virtue. And so just be patient with people, and also just keep the message clear that Juneteenth is an American holiday. It brings about it talks about the ending of slavery. It talks about the realization of July 4, that all men are created equal. Again, it's there. The messaging is there. We just have to keep reinforcing that message and be patient with people, and people will come around. I know they will.
Absolutely. And I'm right there with you. But Marvin, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Thank you to everybody who's watching. If you're watching this later, this is going to be up on wavy.com with a list of, events and resources and more information about Juneteenth. So definitely check it out. Thank you again.
Thank you for bringing me on. I appreciate it.